Welcome back. I am always excited because Tuesdays at 12:30 Pacific, more often than not, hopefully, we get joined by the incredible Koch and Freda Johnson. Thank you guys for being with us. And today's episode, so exciting. All right, I'm gonna go. I'll see you a little bit.
Thank you, Jen. I too am very excited about today. Stanley Jaffe has been responsible for so many iconic, incredible films. For me, when I was about 12 or 13, I saw Goodbye Columbus, and having come from a lot of that life growing up in Long Island, seeing that movie, even at 12 or 13, made me realize there was choice. So I want to thank you for that. I should really revisit it and see if I feel the same way. But all of these movies are fantastic. So thank you, Hawk, for bringing Stanley into our world. And I really look forward to this interview. Thank you, Stanley.
And I get the pleasure of introducing Stanley, who is not only a great producer, but an amazing executive. As they started to talk about amongst the films, oh, he won an Oscar for Kramer versus Kramer. And probably one of the biggest box office hits, Fatal Attraction, which I think all of us stopped if we ever thought about being unfaithful. We never were after that movie. He ran Columbia Pictures. He also ran Paramount Pictures twice, but the second time, he didn't just run the picture area, he ran the whole ball of wax, which included Simon & Schuster, which included Paramount Television and everything else that Paramount was doing. He also was a mentor of mine early in my career. So I want to welcome my old friend, Stanley Jaffe. Come on in, Stanley. Say hi.
My video?
Yeah, hit your video. There you go. There he is. Hi, Stanley. How you doing?
Good. How you doing, Hope?
I'm good. And you're down in Palm Springs, huh?
Rancho Mirage, indeed.
Ah, very nice. Very nice. So we're gonna start just because I want everybody to know a little bit about Stanley other than his upbringing. I've talked to a few friends of his who have agreed with me, and one of them, another wonderful producer, Alan Stewart, said something that I thought was quite good about Stanley. Stanley is painfully honest. Rather than take it on the chin, he'd rather take it on the chin than fabricate. His life is pure integrity. And he said something that I've always tried to use. He told me this in 1970, I think. You have to aim for greatness. You might end up with good, but Stanley was always aiming for greatness. So that's the Stanley Jaffe I get to interview today. So let's start, Stanley. You grew up in New Rochelle, which is a little bit outside the city, and you were the son of a major executive at Columbia Pictures, Leo Jaffe. I know nothing about having a father who was a major executive somewhere. So tell us a little bit about growing up in that entertainment family.
Well, the truth is, my father didn't bring it home. We didn't live in Los Angeles, so he wasn't surrounded by entertainment executives or entertainment people. He went to work in New York like everybody else. He was an extraordinary father. And he gave me only one piece of advice when I graduated school. He said, if your handshake's no good, you're no good. And to this day, I'd like to think nobody can claim I went back on a handshake. But it was a normal life. He worked like a bandit. He started in the mailroom and wound up chairman of the board. I went to school like everybody else, played hockey, played tennis, went on to college and graduated and got my first job. But it was a very good, quiet, ordinary life.
And you had You had two brothers and a sister, am I correct?
I had two brothers, and my mother died when I was 5. And my father remarried when I was 8. She came to us happily with my sister Marcia, and then they had my sister Andrea. So I was one of 5 in the middle.
So did you, as a kid, did you go to movies? Did your dad ever comment on what kind of movies did you go to see as a kid growing up? And did your family talk about them at night?
We talked about it a little bit. I loved going to the movies, just loved it. We also had an Ampro 16 millimeter projector in the house. So we watched movies on weekends and that. And my father, I remember he took me to a preview of a movie in New Rochelle, as it were. And I thought it was awful. I just thought the movie stunk. And I said something to him around people. And he grabbed my arm and he pulled me aside. He said, "You better never do that again. Just remember, this is the company I work for." And I never forgot that. And when I went to work for companies, I remember telling that to executives.
I unfortunately, I'm laughing so hard because my dad, as you remember, made B movies in the 50s for United Artists. And they had a preview in Pasadena. And his partner was a guy named Aubrey Skank. And George Skank, who's ended up a fabulous writer, producer himself, and I were 2 little kids. And they took us to see the preview, and it was called Fort Yuma. And John Bromfield was playing an Indian. And in the scene, he holds up a big rifle and he looks down on the fort and says, "I want Fort Yuma." And the 2 kids, the sons of the producers, yell in the theater, "You can have it."
Good story.
Oh, jeez. So I understand. Shut up afterwards, right? Oh my God. Your favorite, what were your favorite movies at that time? Say again.
At the time I was growing up, I'm trying to think.
Well, I'm gonna say it was the 50s. Did you see On the Waterfront?
Loved it. Well, Sam Spiegel was one of my father's 2 closest friends, and they spent summers together for many, many years. He made On the Waterfront, Bridge on the River Kwai, Lawrence of Arabia. I mean, his movies were my favorites. When I made Taps, he wrote me a note telling me why he didn't like the movie.
Oh, jeez. Oh.
But he was great. He was very, very supportive of what I was doing.
Now, did they teach you how to play gin rummy? Because I understand they played a lot of gin.
I watched my father play. Yeah, I learned how to play gin rummy. I consider myself a reasonably good gin player.
Okay. All right. Now, you're going to high school and you're about to go to college. I think you went to Wharton at Penn. Was business your area, or did you always want to be creative? Where were your priorities?
I have to be honest. I was probably as immature as you could get. I didn't think 5 minutes ahead of the day. So I didn't sit there and think I got into Wharton, so I went. When I got through the first year, because I thought I was going to be a lawyer, I remember sitting in a car with my father and saying, "I don't want to go to school anymore." And he thought I meant I was quitting Wharton. I said, no. I don't want to go to Wharton. I don't want to go to law school. I want to get to work as soon as I graduate, which is what I did.
And you started out where was it? At Seven Arts?
Seven Arts, which was one of the...
Steve Ross, was he running it then?
I'm sorry, Howard?
Was it Steve Ross who was running it then?
No, it was Elliot Hyman and Ray Stark.
Right.
And Penny Hyman. And it was a wonderful little company. When I started, I was invited to lunch in the lunchroom, which was a round table that sat 6 people. At it was the chairman of the board, head of production. And one thing we said, no talking business. So all the talk was about sports, which was my absolute love. And so later in life, I had a chance to do something about that.
So and then you moved, I mean, by the time you were 24, you were the assistant to the chairman. So you moved up.
No, not 34, 24.
No, 24, that's what I said, yeah.
And
And
I was
for
lucky
Elliot
because
or
it's
for
so small a company. I had an idea and Kenny Hines said, go write it. So he said, go to California, because I had to meet Allie Sherman, who was then the Giants head coach, but also coaching the All-Star team. They sent a limousine, a Rolls-Royce limousine to pick me up at my apartment, for which I was paying $125 a month. They had me stay in a suite at the Beverly Hills Hotel. And I said after the first, I can't do this. You got to put me in a room. This is silly. The room cost a month of my salary. And I wrote this show called The Professionals. And I think it was one of the first things Frank Gifford did as a commentator or as the host. And it starred Johnny Unitas. We shot it in one day. We sold it. Then they wanted to make it at CBS into a series. And when we started to prepare for it, Kenny Hyman had a problem with Jim Aubrey and vice versa. And I remember sitting at a table being told the series was being canceled or not going to be financed the day that Kennedy was shot.
Mm.
So it was an extraordinary day.
So now how long did you stay at Seven Arts? Because my first movie was This Property is Condemned that Sidney Pollack directed in 1965. Were you still there?
I was there until 1967, 68. Then I went to do Goodbye Columbus.
Oh, well, so that you were there when, because that was a Seven Arts movie, This Property is Condemned.
Yeah.
And then again, you're in your 20s and you get to become a producer, and you produce two movies, one of which Freda just spoke about, Goodbye Columbus, which all of us of the Jewish persuasion learned an awful lot. but I did not know the other film was called, wait a minute, let me find it here. I Start Counting. What was that?
I Start Counting. I was then married to Joan, and her father and a couple of his friends bought an option on a book, which they then said, would you help us with this? Because they didn't know what they bought. They knew they bought it, but they didn't know how to produce a movie. So I helped them and took an executive producership. And what I liked about it was it got me to London a few times, which I enjoyed. And it was not a great movie. Starred Jennifer Agutter, who was a lovely little actress at the time.
Oh, yeah, Australia.
And the more I worked on things, the more Charlie Bludon seemed to know about it. And so it was interesting times.
Well, did Goodbye Columbus, was it I don't remember, was it a book, an original screenplay? How did you?
Columbus was a novella by Philip Roth.
That's right.
And when I was at Seven Arts, there were a few people at the club my father belonged to who came to me and said, led by Elliot Coulter, and said, if you find something you want to do, we'll support you. So they put up $50,000, which included my salary of $12,500. And I optioned a book called Goodbye Columbus. And I only got that because I went for another book. And while I was away for Seven Arts, someone stole the book out. So at one time I read Goodbye Columbus. I loved it. I contacted the agent, found out it hadn't been optioned since it had been on the market 10 years ago. And I optioned it. And then through the grace of whatever, I got to know Arnold Schulman, who was at that time one of the highest paid writers in the business. And I went to Arnold and we had lunch because I knew him from Seven Arts. And I said, look, Arnold, I just optioned this book. I have $25,000. I'm telling you that up front, which was about a sixth of what he was making at the time. I said, I'd love you to write it, but I understand if you can't. He said, let me read it. I remember reading it and liking it. He called me the next day and apologized. He wasn't able to read it the night before. He said, I'll read it today. He called me up. He said, I'm in. Nat Lefkowitz, who represented him, met with my attorney, Sidney Cohen, and started the meetings by saying, Stanley and Arnold have already agreed to a price, which is ludicrous. Having said that, let's make it fair. So if the picture gets made and makes money, they both do. And that's what we did.
Wow.
But Arnold was quite a gentleman.
Wow. And how did you find, how many people did you look at before you decided on Ally McGraw? Because that was her first movie.
I think Larry Pierce, who directed it, and I must have seen about 1,100 girls. And we're talking about from 17 to 20, 21, because she was a senior in college in the movie. And we finally found them. We finally didn't find them. So we took 4 people out to test, didn't like it. The only person we hadn't taken out to test was Ally McGraw, who we had met in New York and liked. And I said, all right, we're going to test her, because Bob wanted more testing, Bob Evans. And he called me, he said, if you're testing that broad, I'm just giving you someone else to test.
Well, wait.
Sorry?
I said, wait, because you can't talk Bob Evans and just say, if you're going to test that broad. You got to go, they're going to test that broad.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
We brought Ally out. The girl he sent us was very nice, but she had a drifting eye, which made it very hard to get her. Ally was fantastic. And he said, that broad, I dated her out 10 years ago, and the only thing I remember about her is she had big feet. We made the movie with Ally playing a college senior. And shortly after the movie, she celebrated her 30th birthday.
Right.
It was amazing.
Right. And then of course he ended up with her and Love Story and all that other stuff. Wow. So you make Goodbye Columbus. I think it was very successful, as I recall. And then Blue Dorn, and I hate to mention the name Marty Davis, but Blue Dorn and Marty must have said something, because all of a sudden you were an executive at Paramount. You left Seven Arts and became an executive at Paramount. How did that come
before, when I made Goodbye Columbus, I was in the midst of developing another picture, which I love, called Separate Piece. And then Charlie contacted me. And at one time while we were making, he said, would you like to be an executive? And I said, no. I mean, I was so arrogantly cocky. I said, no, the only job I'd want is head of the company. And that's not being offered. So let me just go make my movies. And sure enough, he called me later and he said, let's talk. And we talked, and he offered me executive vice president and chief operating officer of Paramount Pictures and Television, which within a year became president. He kept the title of chairman, but he had virtually nothing to do with the company.
So you were over Evans.
Loved Charlie.
So you were over Evans.
I'm sorry? Yes, I was over Evans.
Yes, you were over Evans.
Reversal of how we made Goodbye Columbus.
Right.
It was easy. I mean, Bob was great to work with. He had an instinct that was fantastic. I wouldn't ask him to write a book review, but his instinct about acting and cutting was just wonderful.
Yeah. I agree. So you stayed there a very short time, because right after that, you called up a young assistant director who was, I think I was like 24 years old. And I got hired to be an assistant director for you on a movie called Bad Company.
Which I loved. It was Robert Benton's first movie. It was Jeff Bridges and Barry Brown, who unfortunately died shortly after we made the movie. But Gordy Willis was the DP. We had more Academy Awards on a picture that cost $1.6 million than any movie I can think of.
Right. So I want to take you back to.
Sorry?
I want to take you back to, we're prepping the movie, and I'm in an office in the Lubitsch building, the writers building, where you and Bob had offices. And you said to me at about 10 o'clock in the morning, today you're going to pick up Gordon Willis at the airport, where you pick him up and bring him back here for a 2 o'clock meeting. And I said, oh, okay, great. And as I was leaving, you kind of said, oh, by the way, Gordon Willis eats assistant directors for lunch. So I don't want to worry you, but just so you know. So I have to tell you this story. I don't know if you know it, but I was scared stiff. Again, I'm 24. It's my second or third movie as a first AD. And I pick up Gordon Willis, and he's very gruff, doesn't say anything. And it's about 12 o'clock. And I said to him, well, we don't, our meeting's not till 2. Are you hungry? And he said to me, you know any place I can get a good burger? And I said, sure. And I took him to the Apple Pan, which is, for those of you in LA, one of the great burger places ever. And we sat at the counter at the Apple Pan. He took one bite and he looked at me and he said, you and I are going to get along fine. And we ended up making 4 or 5 other movies together. And Gordy and I had a great relationship. So, any rate, also Gordy, he taught, maybe you already knew this, but he taught me, he taught Benton. You were in the room, and our great film editor, can't remember the editor's name at the moment, but Gordy took us through the whole script 2 weeks prior to shooting. And he said to Benton, now scene 1, do you want to be wide? Do you want to be tight? You want to be high? You want to be low? You want to be moving? You want to be static? How do you see the transition from scene 1 to scene 2? And man, it was those 2 weeks. I learned more in those 2 weeks about making movies than I ever did. And I don't know if you remember those, but I used that for the rest of my career.
Well, the thing I remember at Gordy, the picture had a spectacular look, and it was never too sunny. We shot the picture in Emporia, Kansas, which hot night spots, but he said to us about a third of the way in, we're not going to show blue anyplace, because he had set the tone of the movie. And I remember we got to the very last day and we had a choice of 2 things. And we started to do the one that was scheduled. And he had said to me, this isn't going to match, and I really hope you'll change your mind. And I remember racing out and turning the production around to go to the set that he wanted to shoot. And the next day we were blessed with clouds, so we had the whole movie in the look that it has now. It's fantastic.
Yeah.
I mean, Michael Chapman was his operator.
Yeah.
And Thea Silbert. I mean, we had the group.
Benton had an idea, if you remember, there's a long dolly shot, about 100-foot dolly shot of all the people that are leaving the East to go to the West.
Absolutely.
Had every single person in that. We must have had, I don't know, 150, 200 extras. Each one of them, we had a character for them, how they were dressed, why they were going, what they were going to be doing when they got to the West. It was amazing. And Thea was unreal.
Fabulous.
So now you make that movie, and then you start, I assume you started your own company, Jaffe Films, and you started, I guess, developing other movies. But the next one that I remember was one that, I hate to admit it, but I actually cried at the end of the movie, The Bad News Bears.
I love that movie.
Still a favorite of mine. And again, was that Michael Ritchie?
Michael Ritchie, who made some fabulous movies.
Smile.
Great.
Huh?
Downhill Racer.
Yeah. Just fabulous. But again, did you find this? Did somebody come with a spec script? Where did that come from?
The Bad News Bears had been given to Paramount. When I left Paramount, Diller and Charlie Bluton gave me a script. We threw away the whole last third of the script because in it there were shenanigans going on that made no sense. And then Michael came onto the project. And one of the great joys was Walter. I mean, he was just a delight to work with. And he said, now look, I'm not going to stand out in the hot sun with these kids and blah, 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 blah. He became the Pied Piper. He couldn't get enough of the kids. They absolutely loved him. And Tatum was terrific to work with. And so it turned out to be a fun movie. And the only thing, I remember 2 things. The first was Michael Ritchie was throwing balls at kids and telling them to look bad. I used to play a lot of baseball. I said, Michael, you don't have to tell them to look good, hit it at them. And of course, half the times they're escaping from the ball was in true life. The second part was they had to be given an hour break at lunch. So we ate very quickly and then went and played baseball for 45 minutes. It was one of the most enjoyable pictures. You didn't have a star who was going to talk back, and it was terrific.
It's so interesting because I also had a great time with Walter Matthau on a movie. And yet the Mike Nichols book, he and Matthau didn't get along at all. But I had a great time with Walter. And of course, how you found that little kid to catch the ball in right field. Oh my God.
Lupus?
I mean, again, casting. I don't know. Did Mike Fenton cast that movie? Do you remember who cast that movie? Was it Fenton? I don't know.
He was we saw hundreds of kids, and we were lucky because at the time, Paramount still had a Western Street on the lot, which meant dirt. So we could actually try kids out on dirt for baseball prowess. And we got it. I mean, I think we really got it. The kids were terrific. They all got along, and it was a joy.
All right, so now you're doing that. You're making movies. You got successful movies, and now all of a sudden, Columbia calls. And was your dad still at Columbia then?
My father was at Columbia, but Alan Hirschfeld took me to breakfast one day. He said, "I'd like you to run production." Peter Guber was leaving to become a producer. He said, "I'd like you to run production." I said, "I'm not sure." He said, "Look, it's not your fault you have a terrific father." So that got past my fear because I never worked with my father until then. And it was a joy, you know.
But you didn't last long because did you find Kramer when you were an executive or?
Kramer, I found when I left Columbia. I hired a young man named Richard Fishoff to be a reader or an assistant.
Still on my Facebook page.
I'm sorry?
Still on my Facebook page. Hi, Richard, if you're listening.
One of the first things he did was bring me a box with a manuscript in it, which was Kramer. And he said, "Look, I liked it. I don't know if you're going to like it. It may just be a movie of the week, but I think you should read it." And I read it overnight. I was through a divorce. And all I know is it moved me so much, I drove around Los Angeles crying for 3 hours. At the end of which, I called Sam Cohen and Arlene Donovan, who represented the book. And I had had lunch with them 2 days after I moved out of my house. And so I was a wreck when we had lunch. And I remember saying to him, "I'm going to buy the book," which is not a great way to start negotiation. I said, "But you two saw me at my worst. No one will do this picture better than I will." And they agreed, and we made a deal.
And Arlene and Sam also represented Benton. So did they say we want Benton, or because of your relationship with Bob? How did that go?
I went to Benton because I was looking for a writer, and I would have loved Bob to do it as a writer-director. And he turned me down initially because he said, "I've committed to do a movie, so I can't do it." I started talking to other directors and other writers, and he called me. He said, "Look, I can't get the book out of my mind. I want to do the movie. We'll make arrangements to push this movie back, and I'll do Kramer." And that started the writing and directing of it.
Wow. Molly and I just watched it again over the weekend. We just wanted to watch it before, and it holds up. And not a lot of movies still hold up that are modern day for their day. And it really holds up. Now, Meryl, I think, had done that one movie about the political movie she had done. She had been in, what the heck's the name of the picture? What was the name of it?
The
Yeah.
War movie.
Huh?
It was a movie where De Niro played the star.
Oh yeah. She was in, and won Best Picture. Yeah.
We chose to see
Deer
only
Hunter.
5
Deer
women.
Hunter, thank you.
We chose to see only 5 people for the part, and had some interesting experiences because each one came with their own little thing. And Bob and Dustin, because we were lucky, we had Dustin to work alongside of them when they were doing readings or whatever. And they both came and said, she should be the girl. And I agreed. And that's how she became the woman in the picture. She was fantastic to work with.
Honestly, it's the least mannered I've ever seen Meryl Streep, having just watched it this weekend. He was absolutely brilliant. And Dustin, but how you got that little Justin Henry, or how Benton got him, to the moves that he made. Even, I know you cut, singles, so you always had time to do it, but the French toast scenes, and what he had to say, boy, how old was he? He couldn't have been more than 7 or 8.
He was 6, and he was among probably 700 or 800 little boys we saw, because Benton and I did the casting together. And we hired him. At the end of the movie, Dustin said he was the hardest person he ever had to work opposite in a movie. He said, because he didn't have a fake moment in it. He just did it, as opposed to somebody acting it or falling back on tricks. He said he was fabulous to work with. And Justin loved him. I mean, and Dustin, who at that time was married or getting divorced and had his children from previous marriage, became a father. He really loved to be a father, loved being a father again. He was wonderful to work with, Dustin.
Yeah, as I said in my opening remarks, I think I was divorced, and I think that that had a lot to do with how I became whatever father I've become. So it meant a lot. Now, you're making the film. It's Columbia, right? And who was running it? Who was running Columbia?
Alan Hirschfeld was the chairman of the board.
And who was head of production?
Who was? Sherry was an executive there. No.
So are they watching dailies and saying, "Wow, this is really special," or is it when you saw the first cut that all of a sudden, not all of a sudden, because I've worked on movies that as you're making it, this is something very special?
Well, I thought we were making something special, but I was prejudiced because it was so personal to me. And when we showed it to people, the response was absolutely extraordinary.
And so now the business side kicks in, and I think Sid Ganis, my friend who sends his love, by the way, Sid may be listening right now, who loved when you were there. The business side is, all right, Sid or somebody in PR is saying, okay, we've got Academy Award stuff here. And the reviews came out. Did you open in the summer? When did you open? Summer, fall?
We opened, when did we open? April, I think.
That's really early for a best picture.
Oh, no, what am I talking? We opened in September. I'm sorry, I'm getting confused. We opened in September, and I remember being at a small dinner party that my father was at. And in the middle of dinner, somebody walked in with the New York Times, and it was the review of the picture, and it was spectacular. And we knew we might be off and running. And then the reviews were really just wonderful.
So now you've talked about your dad, and your dad in 1979 won the Hirschfeld Award. And in 1989, my dad won the Hirschfeld Award. And I'm not sure if you're aware, but this year, for the first time in history, the Gene Hirschfeld Award is being given to an organization, our Motion Picture and Television Fund. So I love connecting all 3 of those dots. I think that's great. And I also don't know if you know, but the producer of the Oscars, the year you won your Oscar, was my father.
Yes.
So, I mean, there's a lot of stuff there.
Well, your father was very special. I mean, he was producing at Paramount when I was head of it. He and my father shared the same thing. They didn't know how to lie. They were gentlemen, and they were very respectful of other people, even if they didn't agree with them. And I thought that was a remarkable trait at that time, where everybody else was cutting everybody's throat.
Yeah. and he taught me, like your dad talked to you about your word being your bond. My dad always said your word is your bond. And when I first shook his hand, I must have been 3 or 4, he said, I need a strong handshake. And I'll never forget, I always had to shake somebody's hand really strong until some major stuntman broke my hand. He wanted to show me how strong his handshake was. Any rate, so now, okay, you go through the Oscar campaigns. I'm sure there's cocktail parties and screenings and everything else. And now it's, I don't know, probably March or April in those days, 1980. You're sitting in the place. I can't remember, did Benton win the Directors Guild Award?
He won the Directors Guild, he won writing, he wrote directing for Kramer.
Okay, so now Benton has won. I think several other awards have been won, and now it's time for Best Picture. Now, I have a few friends who were sure they were going to win Best Picture and literally almost started to get up. And I won't talk about Saving Private Ryan. Sorry, Mark. But tell me about that moment. Now, you were with Ingeborg, right, at that time?
I was with Ingeborg, and my children were both there as well.
Right.
And they got up to the moment of the announcement, and I think everything just stopped in me. I didn't want to get myself crazy if we didn't get it. And then they announced Kramer versus Kramer. And I remember walking up to the stage, and Danny Melnick stood up and gave me a hug that almost killed me. And I went up, and you know, you're talking in front of a few people when you're up there, so you never know how you're going to do. But I survived that, and we took the award home.
Wow. Where is it now? Is it sitting up on that thing up above you?
It's in the other room.
Okay. All right. Okay. Now, you finished that one, and you didn't do hundreds of movies. I always found your career, you waited until you found something that was really meaningful. Movies that probably couldn't get made today, at least not as a feature.
Kramer wouldn't get made.
Kramer couldn't get made. Bad Company couldn't get. Goodbye Columbus would be on the same channel as the Michael Douglas, Alan Arkin.
Listen, I've never had a picture except maybe for Black Rain, which started out with people being optimistic. You know, Goodbye Columbus, who wants to see a picture about 2 Jewish kids? Kramer versus Kramer, I got a call from a very dear friend. He said, have him pull it out of Christmas. I said, what are you talking about? He said, you're 9th on the awareness list. This is something that distributors do to see where they stand.
Right.
I said, it's too late and we're going at Christmas. And of course we ate the competition. You just don't know. How do you do a picture about divorce at Christmas time?
Right. Right.
But, you know, if you tell a story well enough, people will find it.
Yes, I agree. And you found a pretty good script called Taps, or how you developed that. But in Taps, you and Harold Becker, again, found brand new talent. Tom Cruise, Sean Penn, and Tim Hutton had won an Oscar for
They had already won it for Ordinary People, but Tom and Sean and a young man whose name unfortunately escaped me, who wound up being a big star on Broadway. And again, it was a picture where the kids really took part in the movie. I mean, they believed in it to the point that Tom came to me with Timmy or with Sean, and he said, you know, in the fight scene, can we really fight? I said, guys, are you crazy? What happens to take 2? I said, what are you talking about? And they walked away and they realized that that didn't make a lot of sense. But they were great and great to work with.
And Tom is still doing that. I'm going to do the stunt, he'd say. And they shut down, I think, the last mission because he got hurt. He hasn't changed. So now Mr. Cocky Stanley Jaffe decides that, oh, you know what, maybe I should direct. Tell us about Without a Trace.
Without a Trace was a book I love. And I was lucky I got a terrific writer named Beth Gutchin to work with me on it. She wrote a terrific script and I directed a mediocre movie.
Well, but wait, what was the decision to direct? What you'd been producing? What made you decide to direct?
I wanted to see. I thought I knew how to direct. I think the performances in the movie are very good, but I had dead eyes. And it came from my belief that the camera shouldn't move unless it was motivated. Well, as nobody was moving around, the camera didn't move around. But it was an interesting experience, and I was going to direct something else after that. And in fact, I wanted Meryl to do the part that Kate Nelligan did. And originally, Sam Cohn, when I introduced the idea, said, oh, she doesn't want to do it. About a month later, he called, he said, she wants to do the movie. I said, Sam, she knows I'm directing. He said, she would like to do the movie with you. And I went and met her on a set, and we talked about it. And she said something, she said, Stanley, I will definitely do it with you, but can you wait 2 years? I said, excuse me? She said, I want to do Silkwood and I want to have a baby, which was all proper priorities from her standpoint. And like an idiot, instead of doing something else I could have directed, I decided to go because I was ready to start. And she would have made the movie quite wonderful because she would have been able to get around me. But she was terrific. And we made the movie. It made a number of best 10 lists. But if I can't make you cry at the end of a movie where I have the mother reunited with a child who she thought was never going to be seen again, then I'm really not knowing what to do. So it worked.
So did anybody ever suggest directing again, or do you just go, no, I'm not doing that again? Let me be the producer.
I'm going to stay a producer until I decided to try one more time. I was going to make a picture called School Ties, which I loved.
Great movie.
And originally, it was mine, and then Sherry and I worked together on it. And I then was approached by Charlie Bluedorn weeks before the picture was to start as a director. And that's another movie. We found Matt Damon, Ben Affleck, Chris. It was another movie, to the point that I once said there should be a charity game between the cast of School Ties and the cast of Taps. Charlie came to me and he wanted me to become Chief Operating Officer of Paramount Communication. I'm not without an ego. So the idea of doing Madison Square Garden, Simon & Schuster, Paramount Parks, which we bought while I was there, Paramount TV and movies was something I couldn't turn down. It was the most fun job I ever had.
And this is now, I want to go back a little bit. This is 88, you say?
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah. I want to put a pin in that one for a minute because I got to go back to, wait a minute, you finished you finished Taps.
It wasn't, I take it back. It was about 85 that I went into Paramount.
Really? You went to, no, but you and Sherry became partners in
We became partners in 81 or 82.
Right, and then you made Fatal Attraction.
Then we made Fatal Attraction and The Accused.
And The Accused, two amazing movies. Now, take me through Fatal Attraction. And now, I think Adrian Lyne had made 8.5 weeks or 9.5 weeks by then. He had also made The Little Foxes.
I went to London and sent a note to a top casting people or top agents in California, in London, and said, I'm going to be there. I'll meet anybody you want me to meet, but I have to either see or read something they've done. So I got inundated with material, one of which was a script that was written, which became Fatal Attraction. And I brought it home. It was actually a half hour short, or 25 minutes short, called Diversions. And I brought it home and I said, Sherry, watch this. I think there's something here. And she agreed, and we optioned it, and then had the writer do the screenplay. and then brought Adrian in. And Adrian's agent got him the project because we were talking to people and we didn't get any response. And she said, Adrian read it and he'd love to do it.
All right, well, so
He had sent it to him saying they would like you to do it, which we didn't.
well, good agent. So, but let me ask you a question, Stanley. You had been kind of your own person up. You were always solo head of this, solo producer. You had known Sherry at Fox. You knew Sherry at Columbia. What made you decide, or did Sherry come to you? How did that partnership happen?
Sherry was very frustrated at the studio. There were people that were always trying to undermine her, and I know that's true. And she was ready to call it a day.
This was at Fox. I just want to make sure everybody knows that was at Fox. Yes.
And I remember we sat down one day and I said, maybe we should do it together. I was tired of getting on a plane every other week and going out to California where a lot of the action was. And I trusted her. She never did anything when I was making a movie that gave me any feeling other than support. And we had some differences, but it was always about the movie. It was never personal. And we decided to do it. And it was a great decision.
Yeah, no, you guys made fabulous. I don't know if you know it, but Sherry had a one-day bit part on a movie called The April Fools in 1968. And I was the second AD, and I had to knock on the honey wagon and say, we're ready for you. I didn't say Miss Lansing. I said, hey, Sherry, we're ready. Come on out. So Sherry and I started early on together.
She's a very special lady.
Oh, yeah.
Extraordinarily smart. Her yes sometimes is, my no is sometimes worse than, my yes is sometimes not as good as her no.
Oh, her no's were,
A lady.
I worked for her for a long time. Honey baby, sweetie. Not this time. So all right. Now you're making Fatal Attraction. How did the casting go? Was Michael Douglas first? Did you make offers to other people? I know that you can tell the Glenn Close story, how she got the job, but.
Well, Michael was somebody we wanted, and we got him. And then we started looking at women, and we met a number of women. And what Adrian did with Glenn, I have to say, is genius directing. I mean, in most pictures, Glenn would have been the wife, and Ann Archer would have been Glenn's character. And he and I, to a degree, saw something in Glenn we thought could translate to the screen. But when she showed up the first day and he had her hair that way, we were home free. It was brilliant. I mean, Adrian, some director.
Another story, just because I have to tell it. I'm flying from LA to New York, sitting next to this young woman, and we're talking, and she said she's an actress. And I said, oh, what are you going to New York for? She said, well, I'm going to audition for a movie. Have you ever heard of a man named Stanley Jaffe? And it was Ann Archer.
It was who?
It was Ann Archer. She was going to audition for Fatal Attraction. There's always ties somewhere.
Absolutely.
Always ties somewhere. So you made The Accused, you made School Ties, you made Black Rain, and then again you're now running the studio. You're head of Paramount everything, and you said that was the most fun you ever had.
Absolutely. I mean, first of all, I can't go to sleep without reading. I love sports more than anything, and I love movies. So that took care of three. Then we bought the parks. And the thing I remember most about the parks, in March, I went out to see because they had to change the facade of a park because it became Paramount Park. So it had to have something to do with movie. And they had just put in a new roller coaster. So I went out and they said, you want to try it? Why not? So I'm in a blazer and a shirt, no sweater. It's March. We start up and it starts snowing. as you can see, I don't have a lot covering. It was so cold, snow in my face, roller coaster. It was one of the most fun times I've ever had.
Yeah.
And you know,
Wow.
when you're playing where the Knicks and the Rangers ultimately report up to you, it's kind of fun.
Man, must have. And well, the Knicks, right?
Well, the Knicks,
the
we
time?
brought in Pat Riley.
Is
Sorry?
that Willis Reed time with the Knicks?
That was Willis Reed, Charles Barkley, Charles Oakley,
Charles Oakley,
John Starks. It was a
Walt
terrific
Frazier,
little team.
Walt Frazier,
I'm sorry?
Walt Frazier.
Yes.
Yeah. Wow. I mean-
And the thing that made it all come together was Pat Riley. He came in, when I first took over the job at Paramount, everybody had to give me their 5-year plans. And the 5-year plan for Madison Square Garden was, in year 5, they'd make the second round. And I thought, who's thinking this way? So I replaced the head of the Garden. Dave Checketts was fabulous to work with. Neil Smith was fabulous to work with. We got the Knicks and the Rangers. Rangers won the Stanley Cup for the first time in 53 years. And the Knicks got the Game 7 of the championship. So we did pretty good down there. And it was a great job.
Now, just before this, I understand you really enjoyed making a film in Africa.
I'm sorry?
I understand from a fellow producer that you really enjoyed making a film in Africa.
Yeah, thrilled.
Tell us about this, Stanley.
Not my favorite movie. Yes.
Well, we're talking about Alan Stewart, who I hope is on.
Yeah. No, Alan, thank God, saved my life because I had to leave a couple of times.
Well,
You talk about knowing how to produce. Alan Stewart knows how to produce. And like Sherry, got along with people and understood how to say no, but doing it in a way where people respected the no.
well, she said something really interesting. You said you had to get away a couple of times. What she said to me was that you would say, I need to get home because I have to be with my family. And what she says to me, and you tell me if it's true, you never sacrificed your family for work. As hard as you worked, as much as you worked, you always found a way to get to your family.
Absolutely. There was no question about priorities. And if I had to, I remember once flying home from France so I could have Thanksgiving dinner with my family and then turning around and going home. No, family was and always will be my core. And that's what I get up for.
So now you've got, I know I see Bobby every once in a while, but you've got 4 or 5?
4. I have Bobby, Betsy, Katie, and Alex, and they each bring a different kind of joy to my life. I married Melinda. We were married 34 years ago. People said it would last an hour and a half. Of course, we got married, I think, in an hour and a half after we met. And Alex, I adopted. He's my son. I don't even think of him as a he's just terrific. So I've been blessed. You know, you have 4 children. Now I have 4 grandchildren, and I have no complaints.
So, okay, so you're running Paramount, the whole thing. I have a moment where Sherry had been your partner. I'm sitting in a restaurant with Bob Evans in New York, getting ready to we're going to produce Sliver together for you and for, I guess, Brandon Tartikoff. And Bob and I think I may have told you the story. Bob heard something that I told him, and he called you, and you fired Tartikoff, and you brought in your pal, Sherry Lansing.
No, that's not 100% accurate.
Okay.
Brandon was head of the studio.
Right.
And actually good at it. I mean, he had taste, even though he came off networks where he made a lot of, shall we say, not the highest quality shows in terms of intellect.
Right.
He wanted Bobby Fischer. He wanted a number of movies, and he fought for them. What happened at the end, though, we had a meeting of all of the studios, of the studio and all the divisions, and he wasn't prepared at all. And Paramount came off looking actually very poorly in this. We had 160 executives away for a long weekend to learn about each other, and it didn't work out well. And I went to Brandon the next morning with Marty Davis, and we said, we're going to take a little closer look at the workings of the studio. And he said, I think I should leave. Didn't fire Brandon. I could have worked with Brandon. But Brandon felt he wanted to get out of there. And maybe I was the presence he wanted to get out from under. But it carried responsibilities different than when you're working at a network, because you are the buyer and you are the seller, not just the buyer.
Right. And
so he left, and I brought Sherry in, which is what I should have done to start with.
Right. And she was phenomenal. I was there for, I guess, 7 or 8 years of her tenancy there. So she was.
She grew. I mean, when I first met Sherry, she was about to break that fabulous ceiling. And she was cautious. And she didn't want to offend anybody. But she was really smart, so that stood out. By the time she took over the studio the second time, she was very confident. Right. And she was fantastic to work with. And we worked very closely together until I left Paramount.
So, speaking of Marty Davis, who fired Barry Diller, Michael Eisner, Jeffrey Katzenberg, and then you. Why do you think he fired you?
I think it all started because I had lunch with George Steinbrenner. We carried the Yankees on the network, and we were the biggest source of income for him. And the teams were foundering. So that's the only way. He wasn't spending money. And we had lunch. And one of the board members asked me if I'd meet with him because he very much wanted to sell, as did all the other junior members, their share to Paramount. I said I'd have to talk to George and find out what being a minority owner meant with George. And we sat down and talked, and it evolved, and I said, you know, we'd love to buy you. He said, will you give me stock? I said, no, we'll give you cash though. I said, but we can work all of that out. He said, you should meet with my attorneys and learn more. So I thought we were en route to buying the Yankees. And sure enough, it didn't work because George changed his mind and then turned the Yankees into the Yankees we knew. But it was interesting because about 2 days after that lunch, there was a big headline in the New York Daily News, Boss Stan, with a picture of me. And I knew right then and there it was going to be a big problem because Marty Davis, he didn't mind being slightly in the background, but not that much.
Right.
And he was terrified that Diller was going to buy the company along with Malone. Mm-hmm. And he was doing anything he could to avoid it. Even suggested to me, you know, that this sells for less than it's marked. I said, try and sell that to the shareholders that you'll sell it for less than they can get if they sold it in the market. And that's when we parted ways. And by the time we got to the place where Sumner was going to be the owner, I was gone.
Right. So you made a couple more movies, and then still a young man. I don't see any other credits. What changed your mind, and what did you decide to do at that point?
I think when I left Paramount, I was devastated, truthfully. I thought I killed myself for that company, and Davis did what he did. And I think, unfortunately, I involved my son Bobby in a company where I wasn't 100% committed. I realize that now. I didn't realize it then. And we made a movie called The Four Feathers, which was a remake of one of my favorite movies of all time. And we got involved. Well, I won't go into the history. It didn't turn out well. And Bobby and I walked off the movie. Harvey Weinstein was not somebody I was going to deal with. And the director was not somebody I liked even slightly. So we walked. The picture turned out to be a disaster. And I lost stomach. I didn't really feel like doing it anymore. So I stopped.
And golf, tennis,
Golf.
What took over?
20 years more of golf, it still hasn't gotten good. No, I tinkered with some scripts. I have a couple of scripts that I really like, and only recently realized I think I'm going to go up to Los Angeles and see if I can't get them made. I feel great, and making movies, I'm not picking up heavy weights. It's doing something I know how to do well, and it may be time to do it again.
Take us through. I mean, a lot of us know this, but talk about how our business has evolved from all of your career to where it is now, and where do you think it's going?
That I don't know. If I knew that, I'd be a rich man. But I know I graduated Penn in '62, and I went to work for Seven Arts and was there for 5 years. And during that time, the studios owned themselves, basically. They were run by the people who were chairman and president and whatever. And then slowly but surely, Universal got bought by Schuster. And now, when I was head of production or head of the company in '69, if we liked the movie, and Bob and I agreed and Peter Bart agreed, we'd make the movie. Now it goes out for testing and all sorts of other nonsense. And to me, the best movies were made from your stomach. And we did that. And what I've watched now is all the studios are owned by companies. Paramount Communication, which was the company that I was chief operating officer, we made our own decisions. It then became part of Viacom. And by the time it was through, I think it represented 8% of Viacom. And, it was a product producer for other streams of delivery, as opposed to that was your business. And that's not to demean people. They work hard at these studios and they're really good executives. But there is another voice to be heard sometimes, which I'm sure they would wish didn't voice itself.
Yeah. And they may have the guts and the courage to want to make some of those movies, but in some way they're not allowed to.
It's a shame. It really is a shame. I mean, when you make Love Story off a huge bestseller, when you make The Godfather off a huge bestseller, you go in believing these should be hits. No reason they shouldn't. But a lot of the big movies, forget it. Look at Rocky. I mean, nobody ever heard of any of the people that made Rocky. Irwin made this picture that nobody, and it came out at the same time as one of their, quote, blockbuster pictures was being released. The blockbuster fell on its nose, and Rocky became an institution.
Yeah.
And, that's because Irwin fought for it.
Right. That's unique. I mean, just looking this past week, the Writers Guild didn't give the Writers Award to any of the other movies. They gave it to Promising Young Woman, which I thought was absolutely unique, different. I had never seen anything like it. But I think the writers, I don't know what's going to happen with the Academy, but man, it was such a unique, different movie, especially during the Me Too movement. And I just saw that the writer-director just got a big at Apple. I think.
It's a different business. There's no question about it. You were owners of your studios. Now they're part of a conglomerate. So you are working for someone.
All right. So now I know at some point in your career, you were a governor at the Academy, and I was president at one point. How would you, if you were on that board now, let's forget about this year because it's COVID, but streaming has come in, 100%. Do you give Oscars, maybe not this year, but next year and the year after?
Yes.
Do you keep it as a theatrical award, or do you allow streamers to become up for the Oscar?
If you want to protect the motion picture industry, you give it the pictures that are released in theaters. That's my opinion. And if they're good enough to be streamers, they should first be shown in theaters and then put them on the streamer. The thing with the Academy Awards, I don't remember the last time somebody told me they weren't boring. The Golden Globes, everybody's drinking and The Academy Awards, everybody's in their seat. They get up, they speak, and they sit down. And one of the things that's always, this is my opinion, that's all it is. Why are all the songs, they spend more time singing songs than showing the movies that are up for the awards. Have a compilation. Have somebody with some smarts do it as a medley and get it over in 7 minutes, as opposed to each song takes whatever time it takes. That's my personal opinion. That would be, if I were producing the awards tomorrow, the first time I would lobby for.
Okay, so
And
now,
the meaning songs, but I'm sorry, it's a different world.
right. So now COVID's over. Let's say this is the summertime and a movie's coming out, but in 3 weeks or 5 weeks, it's going to be on television, streamed. Are you going to go to the movie theater to watch it, or are you going to wait for it at home? I think I know your answer.
Well, right now with the pandemic, I think that's a small choice. But
No, I'm saying
I
after.
think even after the pandemic has passed us, hopefully, I think people will still have some reluctance in going and sitting 4 inches away from somebody in a movie theater. I hope I'm wrong, but it's going to take time to get the movie business back.
Well, China and New Zealand and Australia, they are lining up to go back into the movie theaters.
I'd love to be wrong.
Yeah, but I'm just saying, will you go if there's a movie that you want to see and the COVID is over? Will you go to the movies, or will you? I'm sure you've got a big screen somewhere. Will you say, let's just stay home?
I want to go to a movie. I want to sit in a theater. I want to hear. Is there anything less funny than a funny movie on television and you're by yourself?
I agree.
I want to hear other people around me. I remember when Adrian went to the theater in Westwood for Fatal Attraction, and he turned on a recorder. And when she popped out of the tub, the screams that, now, where are you going to do that at home? That's just not the same. An experience, there's something wonderful about being surrounded by people and enjoying a movie together. It's just terrific.
I got to tell you, seeing Blazing Saddles in Westwood,
Absolutely.
where people were falling out of their seats. You can't do that at home.
Look, selfishly, I want to go in a theater, buy a bag of popcorn, buy a Coca-Cola, sit down, and for the next 2.5 hours, you have me. Now, there is one other change in the industry, which I'm not sure about. Nobody knows how to make a movie in less than 2 hours anymore. If you look back at the golden days, there were 95 minutes, there were 100 minutes. But with the exception of pictures like Gone with the Wind, I don't remember a lot of pictures being over 2 hours.
Yeah, no, you're right.
It's not bad because we've gotten used to it, but I still think the theater experience is something I will always, always look for.
So I don't know if you do any mentoring, but what, to at least the people here who might be talking to their children or grandchildren, what advice would you give to someone who's wanting to come up and be, wow, Stanley Jaffe, what a career. I'd like to do that. What do you talk about? What do you tell the young people today?
Well, first of all, I'd say believe in yourself. Because if you don't believe in yourself, why should anybody else? And that emanates itself when you're in a meeting with people. If you're confident, I work from passion, and I will fight like a bear for things I believe in. And I think in this world, especially in the industry the way it is, if you believe in something, you've got to fight for it. Nobody's going to hand it to you on a platter. And then I think you have to trust your taste. And if you're working with people who have done it more often than you, learn how to keep your mouth shut and learn. It's a very good thing to do. But also offer your opinion. There's nothing wrong with you having an opinion. It may not be the one the director or the producer will agree to. But if they ask it, give it. And look, it's a spectacular. I love this business. I grew up in it. And I just love what it provided for my family and your family. And, every day you wake up, the longer you stay 12 years old as a storyteller, the more successful you're going to be.
That's the key there, the storyteller. I told my grandchildren, I said, take whatever film classes you want, but take English and learn how to tell a story. Because whether you're an editor, a cinematographer, a writer, director, producer, if you don't know how to tell a story, you're.
I agree.
Yeah.
and know a good story from a bad story.
Yeah. Yeah. I always had trouble with that though.
You know, but it's, look, anybody who wants to go into this business, I encourage them to do it. But give yourself time and be realistic. If you want to be an actor and you've been going to auditions for 3 years and haven't landed the part, perhaps it's time to think about doing something else. But it's better than not doing it because you think you won't make it and waking up at 40 and saying, what if? What if is not part of the life I want to spend my life doing?
Right. Right. Very good. Very good. So if you had to pick, and sorry, Jen, I'm going to step on your stuff here. If you had to pick 5 movies, what are your 5 favorite films? You got 5?
My favorite movies? Four Feathers, Lawrence of Arabia, Bridge on the River. I mean, this is like an homage to Sam Spiegel, Bridge on the River Kwai. I don't know, I liked a lot of movies. It's like somebody saying, you watch something like Singing in the Rain, how do you compare that to Lawrence of Arabia? But I loved it. And I've seen it 20 times and I enjoy it every time I watch it. So it's a hard question. It's a good question, but it's a hard question because there are so many different movies types that it's hard to say that.
Is there a film? Is there a project that you turned down that got made that you go, damn, I didn't see it?
How about Love Story in The Godfather?
Godfather.
Love Story in The Godfather?
Well, yeah, but you were there. Oh, you had a chance to do them.
All Love Story was put on the floor. I was going to be the executive producer. Bob had an option on Allie, and so did I. I relinquished mine. And she came with Love Story and the producer. And Bob was leery because the producer had been an agent, didn't really know. And Allie was very happy to have me back on a set with her. And I was going to be the executive producer. And we met with Eric Siegel a number of times. And I realized that Bob, not meaning to, but he was dictating a lot of the movie, which if I were producer from the start, wouldn't have happened. And I finally said, look, Bob, I don't think I'm the right person. You say jump, I can't say how high. And so I left that. When it came to The Godfather, when I left Paramount, Charlie came to me and he said, I want you to take over as producer or producer with Al Ruddy. And we'll give you, and he told me they'd already negotiated points away from Al for me. I said, no, you've got to produce it. You don't need me. And Francis went on to make the movie that he made, and Al was very much a part of it.
Right. They're doing it. I think they're doing something else. I've read Al's, good old Al, he's still in there working. They're doing something with Godfather now. I don't know what it is, but I think they're doing something for, I guess it's called The Making of Godfather.
I picked up the paper today and read that Clint is going to be writing, directing, and starring in a new movie. And I think, God bless him. I mean,
he's 90, isn't he? Was he 90?
And his movie, I never miss one of his movies because I think he's a genius.
Yeah.
Really interesting.
Wow.
Keep going in this business because you're not doing heavy physical work.
Yeah. What else? That's what, see, I can't retire. I'm loving doing this. This is really fun for me. And I'm enjoying talking to you and all the people I've had a chance to talk to, but I've still got projects. I mean, I don't know how not to want to make movies.
I agree with you. I totally agree with you.
So now you're talking sports too, though. Now you're still a big sports fan. What's your favorite sport?
Well, it used to be hockey. I played hockey. I loved baseball. When I was a kid, initially I lived in the Bronx until I was 8, and we were maybe a 10-minute walk to Yankee Stadium. So after school, I'd go home, I'd get my who's who in baseball. I then would go with a group of guys down to the stadium. The guards knew exactly what there would be a fake fight, the guards would turn to the fight, and all of us would run it. On a Tuesday afternoon in inning 6, they really didn't care. And I grew up like that. I loved sports. And my older brother Howard loved it. And we'd go to the Garden to watch the Knicks or the Rangers. It was, to me, that was my great escape.
Now you made a movie with your brother. Was he on Taps? Didn't you make a movie with your brother?
I did, Taps.
Right.
I'm very proud of that movie, as I'm sure he would have been because he's no longer with us. But yeah, it was fun to make a movie with him.
Well, I'm going to open it up. Jen, if you're there, or Freda, anybody has some questions or things that you'd like to ask, or if anybody out there wants to, you go ahead, Jen.
Thank you. So this has been wonderful. I don't know how much you know about what it is that we have been doing on the campus. The reason that Hawk said he was jumping in on my main question is for a year, we've been asking people that have joined us on this live interactive variety show for the residents what their favorite film is, because we're compiling this list of like the pandemic essentials, basically. But we've added 2 other questions. What's your favorite television show? Because we are MPTF, Motion Picture Television Fund. And what's your favorite genre? Which kind of morphed into either favorite genre or favorite director. And I would imagine you've got some very, very personal firsthand opinions on your favorite director, but what we mean is favorite director to watch.
It's a good question. I like French movies. I love watching Francis's movies. I think he's a genius. Benton, to me, was wonderful to watch. I mean, again, it goes back to what I was saying to Howard. Are we making a comedy or are we making The Godfather? And it's a different kind of director. And it's like somebody says, what's your favorite movie? How do you say that? I said, my answer to that when they asked me that question is, I don't know. Goodbye Columbus was like a first kiss. You know, it was the first time I did it. Every day was exciting. You make a picture like Kramer, it's very personal. So it depends where you are in life also.
And for us, the kind of caveat is always just in this moment, in the present for you, because you can change your answer tomorrow. Your answer could have been different from yesterday. But it's almost like, what do you want for dinner? You know, like, what are you craving right now? Or what's your favorite right now? And television series is also like something to think about.
I like a lot of TV, I'd seen a lot. I saw The Liar the other day and I thought it was a really interesting movie, a limited series. Who are the directors? I can't even begin to answer it because a good movie is a good movie. And I find directors, like Francis to me doesn't make boring. He wouldn't know how to. Bob Benton didn't bore me. Michael Ritchie, I loved his movies when he was making. I mean, Downhill Racer to me is still one of the best sports movies I've ever seen. I don't know. French directors, English directors.
But like, so you binged the Liar? Like, is there anything that you're finding binge worthy?
Oh, The Liar was. I mean, my wife and I tend to watch French, Swedish, English, especially because she's English. And who's that on the screen
Well,
now?
that's Bob Beecher. That's our CEO of MPTF.
Hi.
Hi, Stanley. Good to see you.
Thanks for inviting me to do this. I've really enjoyed it.
I've enjoyed it as well. You know, talking to the new's hottest young guy on the interviewing block, Koch.
Well, there's a good reason for it. He's got a knowledge that very few people have. He understands the question and he understands the answer.
Yes.
Which is better than somebody being given a question or asked that doesn't have a clue what he's talking about. No, this is a terrific show and I'm very proud to have been part of it.
Thank you. Thank you.
I didn't tell you, Stanley, but Bobby, your son Bobby, I guess had watched some of my interviews, and well, you know this? He private texted me in Facebook and said, hey, what about interviewing my dad? I went back and I said, what a great idea. Send me his phone number. And so that's how that's how I got to get to you. I'm stupid. I hadn't thought of interviewing you, and you got to give your son some kudos here.
He's my boy.
Stanley, I'm a one-time New Rochelle resident and a Paramount employee for a couple of years before you were there, or after you were there, or both, I guess.
Good company, Paramount.
Yes, it was. Yes, it was. Sid Ganis is one of my best friends, and we worked together at Lucasfilm, and then Sid hired me as EVP of the Motion Picture Group in 1990. I just helped Jim Henson sell his company, and I worked there for a couple of years until Sid got fired. And someone who you had the pleasure of working with, David Kirkpatrick, came in and took his job.
Sid was special. He was terrific at what he did, and then he got bigger when he left Paramount.
Yeah.
Sid is one of the people I refer to who make going to work every day a pleasure.
Yes.
I was with Sid in a committee meeting this morning at the Academy, and he's still the same great guy.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Freda, did you have something that you wanted to?
I just have an anecdote. I mean, one of the things that I love most about these interviews that you do are hearing names that I've heard from my husband and his family through the years. And one of them is Kenny Hines. And my husband tells this great story of when they were living in London, and Kenny and his dad were very good friends. And Scott was probably a young teenager at the time and went along to a party at the Himes's house and found himself in the kitchen eating because he wasn't with the adults. And in walked Sean Connery, who sat down at the table and had dinner with him. Oh, and here he comes.
She was trying to say Kenny Hyman.
I'm sorry, Kenny Hyman.
She did her best, and I understand gagging on the word, but I was just, it was a big adult party at Kenny Hyman's house in the countryside outside of London. And his spectacular wife, Carolyn, who I failed to forget, many years his junior. And I had no place in this adult scheme of things. And so I went and sat in the kitchen. They had a booth in there, and it was like a display kitchen almost in their fancy British house. So in wanders Sean Connery, and he was, let's see now, when is this? This is like 1963, something like that. 63, 64. And Kenny Hyman was ahead of Warner Brothers or
Seven Arts.
Warner Seven Arts in London before he came back and did it in Burbank. Anyway, I was sitting there, I don't know, drinking something. I was 13 or 12 or something. And in comes Sean Connery, and he's, well, I'm hungry. You have something to eat here. And God, they served him up. And he sat down, and he said, what are you doing here? And I said, I'm just sitting here. Sure. And we just sat and went chit-chat for an unforgettable 20 minutes. And then he went out and did adult things with adult themes and adult language. And I stayed in the kitchen. So there you go. I know my place.
There's a question for you, Stanley. I have a question for you. For me personally, I was working on a movie and I got to meet Roberto Clemente. Okay? Is there an athlete or a movie star or
not sure
a president of the United States?
But do you think we would have any obligation to?
In your life, was there one in your life that you went, I can't believe Whitey Ford or Mickey Mantle, or who was it? Is there one?
Yeah, it was probably Joe DiMaggio.
Wow.
When I grew up, we lived on the Grand Concourse, next door to the Concourse Plaza Hotel. And at that time, it was where all the out-of-town ball players lived. And they'd walk through the park across the street. And I played the park across the street. And I got to meet him. And that was a thrill.
Wow. Well, Stanley, I can't thank you enough. This has been just a great time for all of us. I know the residents loved it. and hopefully our Facebook friends loved it. And thank you so much for doing this. I'm just honored that you said yes to doing this.
Thank you very much. I'm honored to have been asked.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Guys, good luck.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Stanley. Thanks for being supportive.
Nice to meet you and thank you.
Nice meeting you. We've got When We Were Very Young up next. Our gratitude to Hawk and to Stanley. We'll be right back.
How do I get out of here? Oh, here it is.
There you go. So if anyone's at the switcher,